Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 1 of What If Naruto was Hybrid Devil Prince. If you guys enjoyed this what if, and want to see part 2 of it, comment down below and let me know. The like goal for this video is 200 likes. So like this video, to let me know that you're interested in this series, and you want the next part. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. Lucifer was not considered to be an overly ambitious man for most of his life, tending to be childish and insulting even to his fellow great devils. That had all changed though. These days it would be hard to find a more ambitious devil, highborn or otherwise, but with all power and ambition, there came times when he wondered if it was all worth it. And as you could probably imagine, in a few thousand years, there were many times he thought this. Times when all the work and planning seemed useless, and as though the world was crumbling around him. He didn't like it when he felt such fear. Emotions like that were useless to him, and only brought scorn from his other conspirators. But surely if they knew what was going on now, they would feel the same way. And as it was, all those other times were about to fade into insignificance. Dressed in the Devil Lord equivalent of casual wear, Lucifer stored through the majestic halls of his castle. Well, this particular wing of his home was not strictly his. This portion of the Lucifer estate belonged to his cousin. She had living here for the better part of 17 years, ever since she got pregnant. Since then, she had caused a never-ending list of problems, and most of them didn't even have the dubious honor of being easy to deal with. Lucifer smoothed a hand, though his hair in annoyance. He really wanted to strangle her at the moment. But, unfortunately, he was in no position to do so. After all, how was he supposed to strangle someone who could kill him with a flick of her wrist? Yeah, he wasn't planning on making any moves on her, violent or otherwise. Taking a deep breath to steady his nerves, Lucifer pushed open the door to her personal chambers and entered, Black Cloak billowing in his wake. And there she was. He stopped in front of her, clearing his throat to speak, but she beat him to it. "I am not in the mood, Vin-kun. Another time perhaps." Her voice was sweet but low for a woman of her size, and it carried the weight of power. She didn't even bother to look up at him, instead preferring to scribble over a large scroll which was draped over a table. "Kushina, we need to talk now," he said with a bit of urgency. "This cannot wait for later." Her red lips tightened as she finished whatever notes she was taking. She sighed and put down her pencil, standing straight. Kushina was tall, with dark red hair which fell around her in a crimson curtain. It easily brushed the floor if it was unstyled. At the moment, however, it was released in all its glory. A sigh escaped her as she pulled her own small hands through her hair, managing to make the movement far more elegant than he could. Kushina's piercing blue eyes flashed with irritation, while she crossed her arms under her considerable bust. Lucifer used all his considerable force of will not to look at her bare breasts. His cousin wasn't a fan of clothes, and often went in the nude when in her own private chambers, but that wouldn't stop her from tearing an arm or leg off if she caught him looking. She was vehemently anti-pervert. "Well, if it's so important, say it already," she growled low in her throat, startling him into action. "Ah, yes, the Chaos Brigade members under Orpheus's direct leadership have captured another member of the Yokai's people. He's one of the four-tailed foxes. A low-ranked member of the group, but he has considerable stores of power. I wanted to incorporate." His voice was cut off mid-speech as his cousin forced her delicate hand through his armor and into his chest cavity, her slender fingers clutching around his heart even as it beat. Her voice was cold and furious. "I've warned you already. You will address my son with the respect he is due, or I will rip your heart out and eat it." Of course, he gasped in agony as she ripped her hand free, splashing bright red blood over her pale skin. She hissed at him, showing razor-sharp fangs. "Remember who inherited the power of Lucifer. You're a weak and spoiled child with only a fraction of my strength." Kushina used her devil magic to burn the blood from her skin. It flaked off, leaving her as spotless as before. A second passed as his wound slowly closed over. Her attack was not meant to injure him, only to punish him for his speaking out of turn. He gasped again as Kushina proceeded to backhand him, sending a loud snap through the room. "My son is already powerful enough without your tampering. He doesn't require any more chakra abilities, or yokai magic at all for that matter." She spat. "Now, unless you are going in to see him, then get out of my sight. You pathetic excuse for a devil lord." Lucifer rose to his feet, using one hand to pop his neck back into the proper placement. He was used to this harsh treatment from his cousin by now. It wasn't as if his power wasn't great enough to ignore most damage she dealt. Only her magic could harm him. No amount of physical strength would kill one as strong as he was. "I will see the boy then, and be gone afterwards," he said hesitantly. Sometimes she wouldn't allow him to see his heir, even when she said he could. After all, she was extremely protective of him. Lucifer didn't personally understand how she could be worried for him. The brat was damned near indestructible. His father had seen to that. Kushina snarled at him, but quickly reined in her bloodthirst. Lucifer once again reminded himself not to anger her. It was just so hard not to be his usual insulting self. He enjoyed the banter between opponents, but his cousin, along with that whole side of the family, were dangerous to joke with. He didn't even want to think how painful it would be for him if Kushina's son had half as much of a temper. Makes me just that much more glad that he's taking after his father, even if he was a half-breed bastard. Although he seems to be picking up a few bad habits from his godfather. Guess that's unavoidable though. He muttered under his breath as he moved past his cousin, keeping a good distance between them. His mind once again returned to the mystery that was her side of the family. Kushina was what the current Devil Kings referred to as a perfect devil. Someone who not only had unsurpassed power, but also embodied the teachings and views of devilkind. She was almost 6,000 years old, quite a bit younger than him, yes quite a bit, but her power was also quite beyond his own. It all had something to do with an ancient contract with the original Lucifer. The very first Lucifer had claimed that his power would be passed down through his family, but it would gather unequally among his children. Only those who were found to be worthy would gain a large portion of his power. Thus, even though he could trace his own lineage directly to the founding father of Hell, his distant cousin had much more power. In fact, she had almost 10 times as much power as he did. Well, he calculated that he inherited 3% of his predecessor's power, she took 30%. He wasn't necessarily angry with her over it, despite being a bit jealous. She was just a pureblood royal like him, just as fit to have it. But it did cause problems. For instance, when she married a half-human, half-vampire hybrid named Minato Namikaze and had a mixed-blood son. Her offspring was half-devil, 1/4 human, and 1/4 vampire. And not just any vampire either. He was from the house of Vosk, a side branch of Valdi family. The rest of them knew that the boy was an abomination. As if being half-vampire wasn't bad enough, but to have human blood, it disgusted him. However, he had his uses, and more importantly he had his sacred gear. The mightiest non-Longinus he'd ever encountered. They compared well with even against the strongest of the 13 great artifacts. It was called Demon's Eye, Maelstrom Absorption. He had no delusions about what the boy could do to him, and so, he was forced to play nice with him. After all, Naruto had the highest concentration of Lucifer's power ever seen. He was the legitimate heir to the throne, above Surzich's and the rest of his traitorous family. Above even himself. Curse that boy's luck. It's as if heaven itself bestowed its greatest miracle upon him, giving him such power. Risavum closed his eyes. A loud knock at the boy's bedroom door. Then another. Risavum frowned and turned the door handle, entering the large chamber beyond. Shit. Kushina came running. What is it? She demanded. Kushina and Risavum stood in the doorway and looked. Rhea's Gremory pinched the bridge of her nose in irritation, mostly because their homeroom teacher was late, and that meant that she was sitting in class, doing nothing while her peerage's familiars worked to increase the amount of paperwork that weighed down the desk in the orc clubroom. Paperwork which she would have to deal with sooner or later. She couldn't keep putting it off in favor of observing her target. No, she needed to keep up on her own duties as well as looking out for new members of her peerage. But it was just so boring, nothing happened here these days, at least nothing to interest the young Gremory heir. At that moment there was a commotion from outside the hall. Students looked up to see the teacher walking in. He was a fairly short man, with spiky brown hair, pulled back in a ponytail. He had a long scar over the bridge of his nose. Riaz knew it was from his previous job as a kendo instructor. Something to do with an overzealous student. His name was Iruka, and he was without a doubt, the most unassuming teacher she'd ever seen. However, standing next to him was probably the polar opposite of him. Her eyes took in his appearance as Iruka introduced him to the class. Good morning everyone. We have a new transfer student today. He was tall, easily 6 feet, with tan skin and golden blonde hair. It was very unruly, as if nothing stood a chance of taming it. He's coming from America of all places. So he might need a bit of time to adjust. I hope you all get along with him. The young man, whose mischievous blue eyes were shining out from underneath his hair, bowed slightly to the class. Hey everyone. My name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. I hope you'll all be willing to be my friends in the near future. He finished on a low note which sent shivers up several spines. His voice was rich and purring like nothing they'd heard before. It almost seemed to resonate around the room. No, it did resonate around them, deep and commanding. His confident smile showed long sharp canines and shining white teeth. Reyes noticed that he had 3 black marks on either cheek, like whiskers. They lent him a roguish appearance, which was already reinforced by his elegant bow. All around the class Reyes heard whispers burst like overfull balloons, girls chatting between each other at the new student. She imagined that the room heated up a bit, as though all the girls, and even 1 or 2 of the boys needed to fan themselves. Naruto straightened and glanced to the teacher. Where would you like me to sit, sensei? He asked with a side smirk. Ryuz glanced around as half the class sighed dreamily. She didn't really know what to make of it, but one thing was for sure, Kiba was going to have to fight for his title now. Pretty boy number 2 had officially arrived, and boy was he a fine piece of eye candy. She had to admit he was the best looking boy she'd seen this side of the underworld. She was sure that if she was human, she'd be just like all the other fangirls at that moment, swooning over his beauty. Ayase turned around to look at Akeno, who was smiling at Naruto, obviously disrobing him with her eyes. Akeno really. She supposed she couldn't blame her queen for admiring his looks, as long as she didn't try and get him to join the peerage. She didn't have room for just anyone. Well, Naruto, you can take that seat there, next to Tsubaki, Iruka said. Tsubaki, would you raise your hand? Naruto's gaze turned to the girl who sat near the back. Tsubaki's hand rose and Naruto nodded, moving over to the desk and sitting down. She can also show you around the school, and tell you how things work around here. She's a member of the student council, and she knows how we operate. Iruka turned to the rest of the class. Now I believe it's time to get this day started. Everyone open your Algebra 2 textbook to page 76. Ayase pulled her eyes away from the new student, and opened her math book. Unbeknownst to her, Naruto's blue eyes turned in her direction. Naruto watched the girl with the crimson hair out of the corner of his eye. She was beautiful. He'd never seen many girls before, even though his godfather had been very informative on the subject. The only girls he was really acquainted with were his few relatives and his mother, and the maids, but they didn't count. He could feel that she was a devil. And he could easily sense that there were at least 3 others in the room. The girl, Tsubaki, was certainly one of them, and so was the alluring dark-haired one sitting a few seats behind him. And there was something off about her besides being a devil. He wasn't sure what it was, but he would find out. Maybe I can actually have some fun now. I've spent my whole life cooped up in that stupid castle without being able to leave. It wasn't so bad when Dad was still around, but as soon as he was gone, Rissavam and the others started messing with me and my sacred gear. It's a good thing Mom kept them from doing anything too drastic, but damn. It's good to be out of there. He smiled and glanced at his book, already open on the table. None of this was hard. Child's play. I could do this whole book in a day. Wouldn't even have to bother with scratch paper. In hindsight, he might need to tone his abilities down slightly. He doubted if it would be wise to reveal that he could do complex mathematical equations in his head instantly. Such an act would draw unnecessary attention to himself. Then again, I still want to have a good time, and you can't drink blood without piercing the flesh. I'll need to talk to these devils before they go and report anything strange. Naruto's smile turned noticeably feral. I wonder if I should try my hand at seducing some of these girls. That would be a challenge. He channeled minute amounts of vampiric energy into his nose, heightening his sense of smell by 100 times normal. Immediately he was able to pinpoint the last devils in the room. A shorter girl, with dark hair and pale skin who sat in the front row. Naruto realized that she and Tsubaki had some kind of connection to each other. Maybe Tsubaki is part of her peerage, and if that is true, then I'd also be willing to bet that the strange devil girl who is so aroused right now is teamed with the Redeed. I think I'll try my hand at getting close to those two before I make direct contact with them. See how long it takes them to realize their servants are mine. Naruto pulled his power in around himself a bit tighter. No point in trying to hunt the 2 girls if he revealed himself as a supernatural being. And the fun begins. Kushina stared at the empty room. Her son was nowhere to be found. And as far as she knew, that could only mean one thing. He made good on his promise to get out. She honestly didn't blame him. His blood burned too hot to be contained inside the castle for long, and he'd been itching to get out for years. She just wished now that she'd been overseeing it. There was no telling how much trouble he could get in unsupervised. He was a prodigy in every sense of the word, smart and quick to learn, twice as clever as the average devil, and 4 times as manipulative. He was relatively unambitious, but at the same time, when something caught his interest, he was as stubborn as a dragon. She wasn't at all sure what he was up to. He could be in the underworld, the human realm, wandering the dimensional rift, anything really. The only place she didn't think her son would get into was heaven. She hoped to Satan that he didn't try to get into heaven. If he did try, it wouldn't be too long before he succeeded. And she really didn't want that particular headache. Beside her, Rissavam was having a panic attack over his disappearance. And for good reason too. He was their secret weapon, the trump card against the new Devil Kings. If Naruto was gone, then so was any chance of them defeating the leaders of the new Devil faction. Rissavam wasn't stupid, as much as he acted like it. He knew that Sursaches could kill him easily. Likewise, the old Leviathan and Beelzebub knew how weak they were in comparison to their new counterparts, dangerously so. Naruto was crucial to their plans. His abilities were the key to defeating such powerful opponents without suffering great losses. But, if the blonde hybrid vanished, there was no way they could influence him, not that she let them do that. Naruto had complete faith in her, and she refused to let her cousin or his allies taint him. Her husband and Jiraiya were bad enough. We have to get him back, Rissavam shouted. She smacked him into a wall. How do you intend on doing that? Even I can't track him, if he used my husband's techniques to escape. We will have to wait until he shows himself, or causes enough of a stir to hone in on. Ow. Shit. Would you hit me? The others are going to throw a fit, he shouted. Kushina used a sizable magic circle to summon one of her servants. A moment later, a slender woman was standing before her. Find my son. Search the underworld from top to bottom. Get the others if you need help. If you can't find him, check over the human realm. She waved her hand and his servant vanished in a flash of red. As for you, she sighed, turning to Rissavam. You need to learn that my son doesn't belong to you, or even me. He is first and foremost a free devil. Your group is fortunate that he didn't leave sooner. With that she left the room, a small smile hovering about her lips now. It wasn't a bad thing for her son to be out in the world. Maybe he'd find a few servants of his own, or even a mate. Who could know? He was the strongest descendant of Lucifer to date, anything could happen. Better yet, he might make contact with a few fellow devils. If he allied himself with the new devil faction, then she would at last be able to reconcile with Ajuka and Surziches. Kashina blocked out the annoying rants of her cousin. She really would kill him one day. If he didn't get killed by someone else sooner. Naruto smirked. Watching the members of the ORC go about their daily business was interesting. They were obviously devils, as he'd already found out, but it seemed like they were all part of the same peerage. And that of course meant that the other girls were from a second one. It was curious, seeing how devils were very territorial normally. To have two different peerages of two separate high-class devils in the same school was, well, curious. He didn't know how they got along. He rarely found any common ground with other devils. His mother obviously didn't count, and neither did his godfather. He despised Rissavam and his cronies' cohorts, whatever they were. So to see almost a dozen devils interacting in a peaceful manner without conflict was simply amazing. Rissavam never got through a conversation without breaking something or someone. His mother didn't either, for that matter. But other than that, he was content. It wasn't boring here like it was at home. Here there was a flurry of activity. Everyone neatly organized and studious. It reminded him of the video games he used to play. The cool strategy ones his dad gave him when he was little. Everything could be micromanaged with only a little effort on his part. He found to his surprise that his uncle's archenemy was rather popular here. Seeing how the head of the Or Club was Ria's Gremory, and that made her the sister of Surziches, who was about Rissavam's least favorite person other than him. And on the other side of the school was Sona Citri, who was the little sister to Serafo Leviathan. Now that had been icing on the cake. If he could make friends with these two powerful peerages, well, not very powerful by his standards, then he could get back as the stupid Chaos Brigade, and all the idiots who hated him. Rissavam, his fellow old farts, the old devil faction, and the rest of the stuck-up arrogant bastards who thought he was some tool. They would all be having heart attacks at the moment. And when he allied himself with their enemy's sisters, show them who the boss is. He'd even enjoy it. Getting close to the two peerages would be entertaining and challenging, at least he hoped so. Well, he figured he wouldn't be bored for a while. He wished that the devils would at least make it hard for him. He always loved to worm his way into the middle of things. A little disorder never hurt anyone. Naruto scratched at the small of his back. He was getting a bit uncomfortable in the tree he was hiding in. So that meant it was time to make some mischief. Sona grumbled to herself about a certain, soon-to-be pawn, who was being a royal pain in her ass. Saji was just so immature. And he was a closet pervert. If it wasn't for his honor, there would be a perverted quartet instead of a trio. And she'd still have to deal with his eccentricities. Behind her, Tsubaki walked at attention. Her queen had just finished showing the new student around the school and explaining how everything worked. He'd taken it all in and then been gone like smoke on the breeze. Tsubaki gave her the impression that this was a rather impressive feat. Vanishing out from under a devil's nose was no small feat for a human, but it matched his personality. From what Tsubaki said, Naruto was a free-spirited, fun-loving person who was driven by his own wants and desires. He was intelligent, and, if Tsubaki's hunch was correct, powerful. Her queen hadn't been able to pinpoint it, but she claimed that something was different about the new student. Sona was inclined to agree. Naruto was certainly an odd individual. She would be watching him very closely. After all, she still had a lot of room in her peerage. Ryu's wasn't the only one who needed members. Sona reached the door to the student council room and opened it. She stepped through and screamed as freezing cold water drenched her. Then she was bopped upside the head as a plastic bucket bounced off her. She stood there, completely frozen for several moments, unable to comprehend what had happened. President? Tsubaki asked hesitantly. Find him. Sona growled, find whoever the hell set this up. I want him hot-teed on my desk inside the hour. Yes, President. Tsubaki entered the room, looking for clues. At the same time, Sona closed the door with a loud snap. Then she created a magic circle above herself and used it to instantly dry her clothes. When that was done, she joined her queen in the search for evidence. Naruto snickered to himself as he watched Sona get drenched in cold water. They couldn't find him, of course, even though he was in the same room. He was too good at hiding his presence from them. One of the benefits of being part vampire. The elusive race of bloodsuckers were expert in evasion and stealth. Hiding even his outrageously large presence was child's play. Especially considering that the two girls likely weren't looking for magical tampering. He grinned as he watched them. He'd been expecting shock from Sona, but not quite that reaction. Apparently her pride as a high-class devil had been wounded. It was a real shame they wouldn't catch him, unless he wanted to be caught. There was always that, but for now he was happy, playing tricks on the poor unsuspecting devils. Tsubaki searched the room for clues, but soon found herself in a sticky situation literally. Someone had dabbed a strong adhesive onto the undersides of every drawer handle and all the cabinets. The results were her hands being liberally coated in the sticky clear substance. She immediately thought it was super glue, but it wasn't drying until it came in contact with her skin, which meant it was either heat or moisture activated. She fumbled as she accidentally placed her hand on top of Sona's desk, only to have her hand stick there. Her scowl deepened as she yanked upwards. The glue held, and so did the table. However, her momentum brought her crashing back with the table on top of her. She grunted in annoyance as Sona moved over to her. "What happened?" "Glue," she responded. "Glue has been put on all the drawer and cabinet handles." "What the hell?" Sona was looking down to where her feet were now firmly glued to the floor. Apparently whatever the adhesive was, had been dribbled in select places to entrap them. She cursed under her breath and attempted to yank free, succeeding but suffering the same fate as her queen. Her overzealous yank removed her shoe and sent her careening backwards to land flat on her back. Sona experienced the unpleasant feeling of some sticky substance clinging to her right arm, her leg, just below her skirt and soaking into her hair. Naruto restrained the urge to chuckle evilly. Sona had just gone and glued herself to the floor, priceless. I knew this place would be fun. Oh, the expression on her face. She would murder me if she found out. Guess I should get going before she starts getting pissed. He moved silently through the room, dropping a candy wrapper in one particular puddle of glue. Sona and Tsubaki didn't even notice the quiescent shadow, sliding past them and out of the room. However, a full half an hour later they did notice the peppermint wrapper lying conspicuously near one wall in a puddle of glue. It was the same kind of candy that Saji was constantly driving them all crazy with, the constant crunching sound which drove them insane, while they tried to finish their paperwork. The same kind of candy that had been banned due to this annoyance. Sona and Tsubaki, to put it lightly, were livid. There was a commotion in the halls near the second-year locker rooms. Kiba, night of Ria's peerage, had found himself mobbed by 7 different girls. At first he'd been confused. This confusion had quickly turned into abject horror. All of them, 2 first years, a second year, and 4 third years had letters, addressed to them from him. "Oh hell. Kiba, is it true that you've been watching me practice a trap? Did you really mean what you said about wearing tighter clothes? Kiba-kun, you actually like magic girls too? Can you go to the Magic Girl Con next week? Are you sure you only want red panties for your art project? I have plenty of other colors. Did you actually ask me out on a date? Oh, no. Not this, what is happening? I've never even said hello to half of you." His thoughts ran wild. He must have been pranked. This was all some elaborate setup. These girls never got the letters from him. They must be faking to get revenge for ignoring all the girls in class. Frantically he went about on damage control, but the odds were against him. And that's when he looked up and saw a blonde girl with long pigtails running up to him, her shirt scandalously short and her bust barely contained in a too tight top. She skipped along until she was right next to him, crowding out the other girls. "Kiba-kun," she shouted and leaped at him, wrapping her slender yet extremely strong arms around him. He found himself hugged in an iron grip as the girl panted a kiss on his lips and said, "Don't forget about coming over to my place later." Then she was off again, skipping down the hall, and out of sight. Still reeling from the kiss he looked back to the 7 girls, and an old American song about 7 women and stoning came to mind. He recoiled away from the sheer volume of killing intent that suddenly filled the school hallway. He coughed. "Now, that wasn't what it looked like." "Really? Are we supposed to believe that? Do you think I'm stupid? I call bullshit. I think the pretty boy is getting too big for his britches." "Yeah, me too. I think he needs a little help so he doesn't forget about his girlfriend." Kiba turned even as the girls lunged. Too slow. Must escape. Then they fell upon him like ravening wolves. Kiba took his beating, while he silently cursed the blonde girl who had made things so much worse. "I will get my revenge for this." Naruto walked along the hall to the academy lunchroom. Not having any experience with the school yet, he would go there to eat this time. Later he'd find some place that was secluded enough for his tastes. Seeing how he was a vampire he needed to drink a certain amount of blood, and that couldn't be done safely in a school with devils. They would smell blood from across the room or even further. This time he would just have to go without. Although, if I can take one of those girls for my own, I could get fresh blood. He closed his eyes in expectation of it. Fresh blood was 5 times as good as refrigerated. First of all, it was hot and thicker, when it came from the artery directly. Second, it was tastier. He didn't know why, but it was. And last, he could absorb the magical energy from his victims that way. It wasn't nearly as fast as if he used his sacred gear, but it was still invigorating, a rush of power, that made it more than addicting. And that wasn't even counting how it would feel to be drinking from a beautiful girl, lips pressed to her neck, her mouth open in a silent moan. He sighed dreamily, and opened his eyes, turning into the lunchroom. It was filled with students from every grade. Most were too engrossed in their meals or conversations to notice him, but he still drew plenty of attention as it was, particularly from Sona and her peerage. Or, at least the members who were there. At one table were Sona, Tsubaki, Saji, and a girl with long white wavy hair. He didn't know her name. He realized they were looking at him curiously as he made his way into the cafeteria. Should I? I guess it couldn't hurt to go over. Might even be able to tease them a bit. He changed direction and meandered across the room to their table. Sona's eyes tracked him behind her glasses, calculated. Hello, mind if I sit? He asked politely. Sona shook her head. Feel free to join us, Namikaze-san. Feel free to call me Naruto. I get enough of the last names at home. He didn't particularly like it when people addressed him so formally. It made him uncomfortable, regardless how well his mother drilled proper language and manners into him. Very well, Naruto-san. Her violet eyes tracked over him, getting a better picture as he seated himself. I hope you are enjoying yourself here. It's interesting, at least in comparison to what I'm used to, he said truthfully. Sona raised one eyebrow in question. You're the first boy I've encountered so far who prefers school over other activities. It's boring back home. My mom is always working on business, and my annoying uncle is constantly trying to rile me up. He sighed. I just had to get out for a while, therefore, I enrolled here. So you were homeschooled, I take it. You could say that. Dad was a really great teacher. I skipped quite a few grades. He smirked. Just between you and me, I could probably pass every test in this school without studying. Naruto leaned back, but then it would be over, and I'd have to find something else to do. Sona smirked, like get a job. No, don't need one. I have plenty of money. Although, I suppose I'll have to find something to interest me. Can't just spend the rest of my life studying obscure religious texts like some monk in a monastery. All of the devils stiffened, but he pretended not to notice. Anyway, since I'm new to this town, I was wondering if you knew anything fun to do. Besides studying obscure religious texts. Sona clarified. Exactly. Naruto grinned and almost immediately realized it was the wrong thing to do. His fangs were still extremely long in comparison to most people, and devils were nothing if not observant. Wow, look at those. Are those implants? This was Saji, staring wide-eyed at his fangs. Naruto snapped his mouth shut and chuckled uneasily. Sorry about that. It's just I'm not used to being around other kids my age. They're actually a mutation. I was born with them. Most people are kind of freaked out by it. He scratched the back of his head nervously. He was a good liar, excellent actually. Just not with devils. That's interesting, Sona muttered. Must be hard to eat with those in the way. I know, it sucks. Sona blinked, Tsubaki gaped at him, and Saji laughed out loud. Naruto grinned again, realizing he'd made an inadvertent vampire joke. He wondered if it would make them more suspicious or help defuse the situation. Naruto hoped for the latter as Sona was eyeing him with some suspicion. She acts like she's onto me, but she might just be trying to be extra cautious. And she'd probably still tense after the prank I pulled. Naruto glanced at Saji, who didn't look the worse for wear, despite the incriminating evidence he'd left for them to wonder just how much punishment you had to take on a regular basis to act normal afterwards. Or maybe they haven't decided to pass judgment on him yet. Makes me wonder. Naruto opened his lunch and pulled out an apple. It was bright red and shiny. A thought invaded his mind. Devils in an apple, the forbidden fruit. I wonder if I should make things interesting and make sure I always have an apple on me, no matter how ridiculous the situation it is. Then I can keep a constant stream of bad vampire puns mixed with references to old religious books that would help me develop a school persona. He eyed Sona as he bit into the apple with an audible crunch. She frowned and he grinned, chewing slowly. This is going to be a fun year. Rainer walked along the street, searching for her target. It wouldn't be too long. She would find him no problem. And then he would act all sweet and nice and innocent. She would ask him out, and he'd be shocked. The pervert wouldn't even hesitate. He'd say yes. Then, she would let him take her out, then she'd kill him. It was all planned out in her mind. Her boss had given her some discretion on how to kill the sacred gear user. The only points that were universal were the need for a corpse, and for that corpse to be a Seihyodo's. She sighed, don't really understand why I'm wasting my time on a weak human who hasn't even manifested his sacred gear yet. What's the deal with that? I could be looking for that nun right now, but no, I'm on hunting duty. And he's not even a devil. She grumbled to herself as she turned the corner onto the overpass, where a Sei should have been. He always took the same route going home, and he usually stopped to look out over the bridge for a bit before going on. It would be the perfect opportune. Rainer felt herself dragged backwards and upwards. She struggled to rein in the urge to thrust the light spear behind her. She was a human, not a fallen angel. But she let it slip what she minds as well sign her own death certificate. There were too many devils in the area to risk revealing what she really was. Letting herself give a short cry, she struggled weakly to escape. It would still feel like the most lively human girl in the world, but whatever had her wasn't human. She could feel that much. It probably wouldn't realize that she was too strong to be human herself. Then she realized something strange. The world around her seemed to be blurring, disappearing or contorting. Rainer twisted and fell to her butt on a smooth surface. She was no longer on a street corner. Now she was sitting in a medium-sized room. Her violet eyes took in the surroundings. It looked like the typical hotel room. A few dressers, a chest and a bed, plus a door that presumably led to the bathroom. She saw no trace of another being there. What the hell? Where am I? You're being pretty clam, aren't you? I mean, I just bent the fabric of reality to bring you here, and you asked that. I was expecting frantic pleading for your life or something. Rainer froze. The voice came from behind her. It was deep and strong and sensual in a purring sort of way. She whipped around. Sitting behind her with his back against the wall was a young man. He looked about her own age, but he was blonde with tanned skin and deep sapphire eyes. Her cheeks turned pink as she took in his form. He was devilishly handsome, right down to the black marks running back towards his strong jaw. The slitted pupils in his eyes were a dead giveaway to somewhat less than human heritage, and not to mention the fangs which poked out from his top lip. A burst of warmth lit a fire in her chest. She instinctively wanted to keep it together. Now isn't the time to give in to my stupid urges. Who is this guy, and what does he want with me? Does he know what I am? Raina cursed the fact that her patron's sin was lust. She was always weak to handsome men, and now was not the time to get hot under the collar. This guy was almost certainly a devil, and would likely kill her if he even suspected what she was. After all, this was a devil-owned town, and Fallen weren't welcome without permission. Crow, got your tongue, Fallen. She winced. He knew. I don't know what you're talking about. Blue eyes regarded her coolly, sending a shiver down her spine. Now there isn't any point in trying to lie to me. I followed you, you know. When I smelled you just after lunch, I decided to follow you. I didn't know what a Fallen was doing here, since this is like the most devil-influenced town in the country which is still human-owned. I figured you were going to do something unpleasant to that poor kid, so I grabbed you. He grinned, showing off his long fangs. Besides, I'm still thirsty, and I've never tried Fallen before. Raina gritted her teeth. The way he said that just made her body tingle. When did I get so weak? Or is he just strong enough to make me react to him? And if he is that strong, how did I not notice him? Anyone that strong would stick out like a sore thumb. I don't even remember seeing this guy before. Confused Fallen-chan, he asked lazily. Who are you? Now that there's what I like to call confidential information, you know. I could tell you, but then I'd have to find some way to prevent you spilling the beans. His grin widened, as if in anticipation of silencing her permanently regardless. You mean killing me? She stated bluntly. Well, if you insist I need to kill you to keep something secret, then you must be one of those songbirds. What did my mom call Fallen who couldn't keep themselves from repeating everything that someone else told them? Oh, I think she called them pears. He shrugged dismissively. Other than being a devil, there really isn't much you can really say about me, so I have no reason to kill you. Light glinted on his pearly white fangs as he continued, unless you give me a reason. Rainer shifted backwards a bit, needing to put more space between them. If her lust got the better of her, she would be in a very difficult situation. She didn't like devils, but she wasn't at all sure she could resist if he tried something on her. I have a job to do. If I don't get it done, I'm dead. But this devil might just kill me here. I have no way of knowing if he intends on killing me once he has whatever he wants. I'm serious about not killing you, in case you were still wondering. But there is something I wanted from you. Did he just read my mind? He leaned forward and smiled. I know you're probably freaked out right now, but if you give me a few things I want, you can go free as a bird. Just make sure you don't squawk, and we'll do fine. What do you want? She asked hesitantly. Oh, well, a few things. First, I wanted to know what you Fallen are doing here in Kuo Town. Mainly because there are a few people looking for me, and if you cause a big stir here, I'm going to have to beat a hasty retreat. Second, I want you to stop trying to kill people. Especially students at a school that I attend. That will cause enough problems on its own, but I'm pretty sure that the devils in the school are keeping an eye on your target. Rainer went pale as he continued. The last thing I needed, well, let's not bother talking about it since you're not leaving this room till I get it. A fiendish smirk crossed his lips as he lunged forward. She tried to move out of the way, but it didn't do any good. He was on top of her in a flash. His powerful muscles held her to the floor like iron manacles. Damn. He was strong. She struggled to break free, but it didn't do any good. He was holding her effortlessly, still smirking down at her. Come on, Fallen-chan. It'll feel better if you just relax. His face dipped down, nearing her neck. A soft bit of her skin caused her face to burn crimson, and her instincts roared back, demanding to let him ravish her. Raina gave in to the rapidly building pleasure. She allowed herself to go limp under him while she gazed into his slitted eyes. That's better, he growled as he bent down again, pushing his face into the crook of her neck. A moan escaped her as she felt his lips kissing her throbbing artery. Then pain bit sharply as his fangs plunged deep into her flesh. His hands, gripping her arms, tightened as his lithe body pressed down. She couldn't fight him. Her core was hot, and the pain excited her. He was drinking her blood. What the fuck, he isn't a devil. He's a vampire. The thought was unexpectedly pleasant, probably because it felt so good. His fangs sent lances of pain through her neck and shoulder, but at the same time the contact was driving her out of her mind. Rainer gasped as she lost control of her powers, her illusion shattering. She felt him withdraw as a tearing sound filled the room. Her wings were free, but that small relief wasn't noticeable. Her old proportions had returned, and these clothes were now uncomfortably tight. One finger flicked her nipple, and sent her back into an arch. Now Full-Chan, I've had my little taste, and I do mean little, so now I'd like my questions answered. If you're helpful I might help you with your problem. He smiled down at her, showing off his bloody fangs. Rainer felt his fingers trace up the slope of her breast, barely hindered by the straining fabric, to where he'd bitten. Then he held 2 fingers to the puncture wounds. The sudden pain turned quickly into pleasure, drawing a whimper from her. She closed her eyes, wanting to savor the sensation, before he withdrew again. But he didn't. What he did do, was proceed to rub his fingers back and forth while leaking something warm into her. It felt like he was channeling magical energy, except for some reason he wasn't using a magic circle. And it was amazing, like she suddenly dropped into a hot spring. First question, and do answer quickly or I might retract my or, what is your name? Rainer. She managed to say it without moaning. Not focusing on the pleasure was so hard. Next question. How many fallen are in the area with you and what are their names? He moved and his other hand caressed her thigh, moving up under her skirt, tempting her. She struggled to recall their names, though the haze of pleasure and annoyance. Couldn't he just get it over with and stop torturing her? There are 3 others. Middled, Kara Warner, and Donasik. No others. He raised an eyebrow. You must have been very confident in your skills, thinking that 4 Fallen could infiltrate Kuo Town and kill someone without getting caught. Tell me what your purpose here was. To kill a nun. There's a girl coming to town shortly. We were told she possessed the rings of twilight healing. I was to extract them and seal them inside myself for later use. Rainer bit back a moan as his hand smoothed over her thigh, coming to rest over her panties, which he rubbed experimentally. And why target that boy? Rainer mumbled, a threat, has a sacred gear. Boss wanted him dead just in case. Good. Now about your friends. Do you care for any of your fallen angels? Not my friends, she managed to say. Kara, she's alright. He hummed in thought. Okay, so you wouldn't mind if those other 2 died, right? He sounded a bit too pleased by that. No? Excellent. Then I'll have something to occupy me other than school and messing with the devils around town. A curious expression came over him. I was just thinking, Full-Chan. I'm not going to let your friends kill anyone, and so your mission is almost defiantly going to be a failure. I bet your boss won't be too happy about that. He wouldn't, she admitted. Although in reality he'd most likely kill them for their failure. Okay then. I have a proposition for you, Rainer. You become my servant, and do anything I want. And in exchange, I'll make sure your boss never kills you for this failure. Abruptly all pleasure she was feeling vanished, leaving her quite cold under him. He pulled back, releasing her. Bewildered, she sat up clutching at her neck where there wasn't even a ghost of warmth. She saw her tormentor sitting against the wall again, grin gone as well. What was? I withdrew my power from you, and stopped pleasuring you in any way. He shrugged. I asked you a serious question just now. I could have made you answer in the affirmative using your lust, but then it wouldn't mean anything. And you'd probably hate me afterwards for taking advantage of your weakness. So I pulled back, so you can think about it yourself. He crossed his arms as a small smile found its way to his lips again. Rainer just had one question. Why? Oh, for quite a few reasons actually. One of them is simple. I'm what you might call a, seducer. At least that's what my godfather called me. I take great pleasure in breaking down people's walls. If you're shy I'd get a kick out of opening you up. If you're a bitch, I'll just make me want to cut you open to show your sensitive side. If, like you, I think you need to have your goals readjusted, I'll readjust them. I like you, don't ask me why. Some people I like, and some people I don't. I see you as a good girl, so I decided to act. He scratched his chin, and pondered his next words for a moment, then said, another reason for having you serve me is a wealth of information on the Fallen. I've been stuck at my home, since I was born. I haven't really been out of the house my whole life until now. So I need someone who is willing to tell me what I want to know, and yet keep my own whereabouts secret. Then there's the part where I think you're attractive, and I wouldn't at all mind being able to drink your blood whenever I get thirsty. His small smile widened into a feral grin. I wouldn't mind doing other things with you, if you wanted. Rainer blinked. You're being honest. What reason would I have not to be? I mean, unless I'm one of those sick bastards who gets pleasure out of breaking people's spirits. I could be one of them. He shrugged again as if saying, you never know. She frowned. She knew that it was entirely possible. Her boss was actually just that kind of man. But was this guy one of them? He practically kidnapped her, right before she was about to talk to her target. So he obviously had some concern for him, or was telling the truth about not wanting attention drawn to him, or the town in which she was living. She supposed that he might be allied with the devils here, and this was her interrogation before he handed her over to them. This might be his way of offering her a safe way out. That was of course assuming that he and the devils were working together. There was also the possibility that he just wanted to get her under his control for a steady supply of blood. She knew a vampire who worked for the Grigorous. He was a foul-mouthed little bloodsucker, but he certainly could give her a run for her money, provided he drank fresh blood once a week. She knew that to stay healthy, vampires usually needed to drink once every 2 days. And to be satisfied twice a day was actually more realistic. Then again, would I mind if he bit me? It felt so good the first time, and he said he only took a bit. It might be worthwhile joining him if he was interested in drinking my blood often. Rainer briefly wondered where her complete lack of loyalty to her own faction came from, but dismissed it. She was under no illusions about her place in the ranks. She had only one set of wings, and was under the command of a fallen who wanted to restart the endless war between factions. Without any connections or way to get out from under his direct command, she would eventually be punished along with him. Azazel would punish them all, even though many of them were only following orders. She probably wouldn't be too bad off, but that was assuming she lived long enough to be punished in the first place. Then she would likely be relegated to some position even lower than the one she had now, with no opportunity to advance for a few hundred years, at least. All in all, it was one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't situations she heard so much about from Domasik. Now there was someone who had more than his fair share of screw-ups to his name, and she'd be right there with him. Rainer looked into the blue-slitted eyes that were offering a different kind of servitude, and she had to wonder. Was it better to go with the hell that she knew was coming, or the hell she knew nothing about? He hadn't even revealed his name. Everything she had on the guy was barely circumstantial. He was a vampire. He was stronger, much stronger than her. And he seemed to be moderately sane, if mischievous. She made up her mind. May I at least know the name of my new master? Naruto. Naruto what? He smirked and leaned forward. Before you know my true nature, I need more than just you asking a leading question. I need something that guarantees your service. What is that? She shifted uneasily. I don't know how vampires do that sort of thing. Well, if I did it the vamp way, I would just drink enough of your blood and magic to weaken your soul ties. Then I would inject trace amounts of my own soul into yours. Being more powerful than you, my soul shard as it's called, would dominate your mind and make you utterly subservient to me. Your connection to me would make sure I didn't even have to speak for you to know what I desired. Rainer gulped. But that isn't any fun. I don't want some mindless lackey. I don't need some scantily clad maid fuck toy. I want a servant who can think for herself and can improve in her abilities, thus being able to help me to a greater extent. Using vampire methods wouldn't be to my or your benefit. He leaned back. I could use the human magician's method of gaining subservience. I know one in particular which would be very effective. But again, it's damaging to the servant. Naruto sighed. That leaves only one. I'll use the devil method. But not the new devil method. I don't have a set of evil pieces, so that option is out. Rainer watched as he raised a hand and used one finger, now tipped with razor-sharp claw, to slice open his wrist. Naruto spoke as he moved towards her. This is an old way of enslaving others that the original devil families use, except my father altered it. Instead of killing you when you disobey, it merely paralyzes you or sends a jolt of my magical energy through your system, rendering you, He stopped for a second while she looked up at him. His eyes met hers again as he pushed her down on the floor with one hand. That's it. It would render you incapable of disobeying me for quite a while. Since you are fallen with your primary sin being lust, anyone who can dominate your power completely as I can, will be able to force you to do what I want. He winked at her. And it would be very enjoyable, not being able to disobey. She stifled a complaint as her wings were stuck between her back and the cold floor. Naruto moved his claw to his still bleeding wrist, and dipped it in blood. Seeing her look of faint disgust, he sighed. Don't be so dramatic. This little scratch is nothing. I could heal instantly at will. However, I need some kind of medium to write with, and I don't see any magically infused ink lying around here, do you? She shook her head. Good. Now then, this ritual I'm using will bind you to me indefinitely. Basically, you will be bound to me for the rest of your life, unless I die or decide to use another ritual to nullify the first. He looked down at her frowning. Almost forgot. Needs to be on bare skin. With a judicious tug, he ripped the front of her schoolgirl uniform open. She mentally approved of this, both because she preferred to be wearing less clothing anyway, and because the uniform was exceedingly tight on her original form's more gifted body. She just wished he pulled the damn bra off, since that extra cup size difference between her human form and her fallen one was starting to hurt. Naruto either needed more space to write, or he sensed this unspoken request, because his claw snicked through the thin fabric of her bra, the two sides flying open as the elastic was severed. Then without further ado, he began to write. It tickled and she had to bite her lip to prevent from giggling. She refused to do that in this situation. His claw traced a circle that started just above her belly button, and then traced around her sides, and went slightly under her breasts. All the while he continued to refresh the ink from his wrist. Several minutes went by before he was done. Rainer was about to sit up and look at what he'd wrought when he leaned over her again. Their eyes met for a second. This is either going to feel like the best orgasm of your life, or it's going to feel like being ripped apart by an angry fire elemental, he said calmly. But it's necessary, so on the off chance it's the latter. Naruto kissed her on the lips, earning a short whimper from her as her fallen instincts once again prompted her to demand further action. However, as she tried to push up to return the kiss, she found herself quite literally paralyzed. I use a bit of vampire magic to freeze you. That way you don't interrupt the ritual when it starts, you know, screaming or thrashing, the usual stuff. He tilted his head to the side, smiling warmly. Now this is going to hurt a little. Naruto leaned down once more and whispered in her ear. I'm using yokai energy, called chakra, to complete the seal. Don't ask me why, since I don't know, but it requires that I bite you for some reason. She attempted to settle herself, imagining that it would hurt many times worse than the bite he'd inflicted earlier, but when she felt his teeth sinking into her, all she felt was a massive burst of some energy. Not fallen or devil, or even vampire. It poured through her, seeming to pull in her stomach. That's where he was riding. What is going? Ah. Reina cried out as white fire erupted from every cell in her body, and she realized that Naruto's analogy was perfectly accurate. Being torn apart by fire elementals just about summed it up. She screamed even as she was unable to move. She screamed herself hoarse as lines of liquid fire spread and shifted over her skin, interlocking and searing themselves into her. It seemed to go on forever, until it quite suddenly bit off like a badly tuned piano being hit with a sledgehammer. At the same time, whatever paralyzation spell Naruto had placed on her wore off, and he quickly pulled back. She gasped, taking in a huge breath, and using it to let out one last scream as her tenderized nerves recovered. Then she just lay there, waiting. You okay? Do I fucking look okay? Well. Reina threw herself into a sitting position, lining up her fist to knock his face in, but quickly rethought the action as a wave of pure ecstasy overwhelmed her. She fell back with a muffled moan. And that would be the yokai energy kicking in. Any time to try to do something to consciously hurt me, directly or indirectly, the seal will activate and flood your body with yokai energy. Now for someone like me who has the ability to absorb any kind of energy from just about anything, there isn't much I don't know about the weaknesses of the different factions. He held up a hand within view, counting off each finger. 1. Angels are weak against vampires and certain devils. 2. Most devils are weak against angels and some fallen. 3. Vampires are weak against devils. 4. Yokai are weak against angels. 5. Fallen are weak against yokai. He smirked. Oh, and all of them are weak against dragons. When yokai energy interacts with the nervous system in fallen angels, it causes the signals to get mixed up. Depending on how it's used, it can cause immense pain or debilitating pleasure. It also widely depends on the kind of yokai and by extension the kind of chakra they use. I can purify yokai into a yin and yang chakra, which can then be used in jutsu. Naruto gestured to himself. Me and my father both have this ability. And my dad is one of the few people to ever use jutsu, which are special techniques that can only be accessed using pure chakra. Rainer managed to sit up again. Wah, what are you? I'm half devil, 1/4 vampire, and 1/4 human. And, who are you? She frowned. Now that you've sealed me or whatever. My full name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze Vosk. Uzumaki from my mother who is a full-blooded devil. Namikaze from the human side of my dad. And Vosk from the vampire side. Rainer's eyes were wide. But, Namikaze, that's the name of she gulped, the human clan that used real sorcery. And Vosk that's like royalty in the vampire families. You're right on both counts, but you didn't comment on my Uzumaki heritage. I've never heard of them, she admitted. Oh, well, allow me to enlighten you now that you can't tell my secret. Uzumaki is the human name given to the great devil house of Lucifer. Rainer's eyes bugged out of her skull. Lucifer. Yep. Pretty cool, huh? I'm a noble on my human side. A side branch royal on my vampire side, and main branch royalty on my devil side. Actually, if you want to be technical about it, I'm Lucifer's heir. Naruto flashed his trademark grin and put his hands behind his head. Feel free to bow. She blinked and then ducked her head. Yes, Lucifer-sama. He coughed. Okay, just kidding about the bowing part. You never have to bow or call me sama, unless I end up taking you to meet someone official. I hate honorifics. I get enough of that from my stupid uncle. Who is? She wasn't quite sure she wanted to know which stupid uncle he was referring to. Best of him, Lucifer. He's my mom's cousin. He's also a jackass, but I don't want to talk about him. I left home because I was tired of being locked up like some old artifact. I needed to stretch my legs, find adventure, commit genocide, and get a harem. You know. The usual stuff that Lucifer's heirs want to do when they grow up. Committing genocide doesn't seem like something you would do. Yeah, I was kidding about that part, but I've been seriously thinking about building a harem, and the adventure is a definite yes. Rainer looked up at his puzzled. So, what are you doing at the moment, and where do I fit in the scheme of things now? Naruto gestured to her, and Rainer suddenly felt herself sliding across the floor to him. She squealed as his arms wrapped around her, holding her tightly. A shiver ran down her spine as he growled in her ear. Right now? I'm just happy I can drink the fallen blood of yours. She moaned slightly as he bit her neck softly. It's better than anything I've had before. Rainer bit her lip to stop her reaction to his hands, which had moved up under her breasts, cupping them lightly. Feel free to make those wonderful noises, you know. With that, his fangs were buried in the hollow of her neck. Raina closed her eyes and let herself relax against his broad chest as he drank deeply. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want a next part of this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. And also check out the other videos that I have created, and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.